Hi, Sarah. I'm Francesca Lia Block, and I write fiction mostly and other things as well.
I feel like we should start by telling the strange kismet story of how we met.
Absolutely. Yes.
So we went to the same dance class for a long time, and I was very attracted to you because you wore beautiful pink sparkly things to dance in. And we would dance together, and then afterwards we would frequently be on the same couch putting our shoes on. And I knew your name was Francesca. That's all I knew. Just hot lady named Francesca. And then one day you told me you were a writer. And I had this moment where I was like, wait a minute. And I realized that that's part of the reason you seem so familiar the first time I saw you is because I have been looking at your author photo for so many years. I'm so glad I didn't know that at first because I would have been very starstruck.
Well, thank you. I'm very starstruck every time I see you now. So
many people who are watching this are familiar with your work, and those that aren't will have like a treat in store because you have a lot of novels. How many books have you published?
I've kind of lost track at this point. So I like to say around 25, but it's more than that. But some are very short, some are compilations. So I just say 25-ish.
So I open up my Instagram stories for questions. And when people ask questions about writing books, I think that's the most intimidating form to start. Screenplays just have more white space. Short stories are short. There's something about a book that is intimidating. Do you ever feel that before you start a book?
I was very naive when I started, and I have this exercise I do work with the gift and the flaw of the character, right? And the gift might have been that I was optimistic and thought I could do anything I tried. And the flaw was a sort of naivete about that. But I wrote a lot and I published a lot of imperfect stuff because I just loved it and enjoyed it and had this effusive, excited energy to just write. So I got a lot done and I learned a lot as I was doing it. Now I am in some ways more intimidated to start a novel because I know really how hard it is. But I try to preserve that excited innocence of like, just put it all down, just write it, just get it out there. Because I think that's where it starts. If you don't do that, what can you work with? It's like baking without ingredients. You need that raw material that just spills out. And then you can learn craft elements to make that stronger.
When you start with a new idea, how much structure do you walk into the pages with? Do you outline?
So I never used to outline because I had the advantage of a lot of time to write my way into the dark forest and get lost and go on a whole bunch of different paths and then go back and revise and figure out what I wanted to say much later. Now I have to produce books more quickly. So instead of going into that dark forest, I usually have a map now. And I usually use these 12 questions to help me structure the story from the beginning. They're in my book, The Thorn Necklace, and I use that as an outline now. People worry, if I outline, it'll confine me too much, but actually you can still divert from the path and find really interesting things, but you just have a little bit more of a central path to follow.
Outlines are answering your 12 questions. Thorn Necklace is full of a lot of great specific writing tips for people who are jumping into that particular dark forest, as you say. I feel like for me, easily more than half of it is just the mind game of trying to put the excited, naive writer girl ahead of the committee that is telling me that I'm bad and wrong, or that it's too risky, or that I'll never pull it off.
Yes, absolutely. That inner critic, you just have to shut her up for that first draft. I mean, she's just not going to help. She can be helpful later. She can come over later, but I'm in quarantine now from her. It's like, no.
I feel like you are so fluent in all of the archetypal language in your work. I'm going to say you have 5 or 6 books that are actually based on classic literature or mythology. Talk about it. Tell us about it.
A lot of fairy tales, a lot of Greek mythology. I go back to those frequently. They teach me so much about story, really. And then I layer on my own experiences.
I love adapting existing material, partly because when I have somebody else's story to build off of, somehow it feels safer for me to start bringing in these personal things. Again,
yeah?
It's all about tricking myself into going deeper.
Absolutely. I teach a class on fairy tales. I start with the fairy tale, pick a fairy tale you're drawn to, right? Why are you drawn to it? And then more and more, I kind of coax people toward in their own experience of why they're drawn to that, because that's what's going to make the fairy tale relevant and alive and meaningful on a deeper level. I mean, that's really important to blend the two things. And you're right, that helps you enter into that deeper relationship with the writing when you have sort of that external story structure.
You're talking about like why the story speaks to you. I feel like this is something I've been hearing a lot from writers that I've been talking to about this, that so much of our anxiety headspace is about it being good and done and also like marketable, sellable. But then so much of what makes writing work is just about finding what you fancy, like finding what gets you up in the morning because you want to explore it more. So at a certain point, it's like you have to almost just give up on the idea that it'll ever be sold. Not you, because you at this point you I think you have contracts before you even start sometimes, right?
Sometimes.
But the essential process of being a writer is about going just like following your unconscious motivations towards a story, your urges towards an archetype.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting for me to hear you say it, because I do have to do that first, but I have been in the position, and I know you are, where I did get a book contract and certain things are expected. So how do you take that thing that's expected and bring in something that personal? Sometimes I really wish I could be that novice writer, like a lot of my younger students or newer students, because they have no pressure from that place and they really can explore anything. But of course, there's all that internal pressure that happens no matter if you have a contract or you don't. It's still hard. You still have to get over that. But there is a freedom when you don't have to write to an assignment or something. So how do you make that assignment feel alive and fresh?
So how do you make the assignment feel alive and fresh, Francesca? Tell us how to do it. Do you write in the morning? When do you write? Or is it different every time?
I am not one of those people with the amazing schedule who sits down and does, I write as I can. But what I try to do is like, what about this story is relevant to me right now? Like an example is I was trying to write a more straightforward story about what's going on right now, and it just wasn't working. And then there's a fairy tale called The Blue Light, which is a lesser known Grimm's fairy tale. There's a woman, or actually it's a soldier, it's a man, I made it, a woman gets trapped in this well by this witch because she says, go down to find the blue light. That I can take what I'm feeling about everything going on around me. I can make up a story that combines those things. I'm not sure what that is yet myself, but I see a relationship.
That's really key what you just said about like pushing past the story to the feeling. I think about that a lot right now. We're writing a show that is not about the pandemic, but we're also not going to be able to, it's not like we stop being human when we sit down and write the 10 scripts that we're writing for season 3 of this show. So we talk a lot about like when you feel trapped, when you feel uncertain, and there's something cathartic. There's a relief. To me, it's a relief. Here's what I'm hoping. Like some of the people who have been writing and saying like, I don't know how to deal with the level of anxiety I'm feeling, like I can't sit down to write. It's like, well, writing might exist to help with it. It might be a way to safely process as tiny a little bite as you possibly want to take. You don't even have to say the word pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. Writing for me has, and I think for you too, has always been catharsis. It's always been the place I go that's safe, that I can be myself, that I can explore my feelings and thoughts in a free and uninhibited way. There's a book I always talk about called The Midnight Disease, which is by a neurologist who had this tragic thing happen to her and she couldn't stop writing. And she just was covering all the surfaces with this tiny little writing. And when she recovered from this condition that she calls hypergraphia, she studied it and she wrote a book about it and found that there's an actual mechanism in the brain that helps heal trauma through self-expression my favorite story in the book is that there was a study of Holocaust survivors, and they said that the two things that helped them were telling their stories and massage. Those are both things that get your story or your feelings out of your body in a way, right? So I think it's the same thing. It's like writing it out can be extremely healing and letting it out of your physical self.
Yeah, which is like, most of us are not going to get that many massages right now. We're not allowed to be with
Exactly.
people. So we're either around people too much or not enough. One of the things that you and I have so much in common is this passionate love affair with fairy tales. I feel like they're so powerful as a tool, just to start reading it, to open up the less linear, logical parts of your brain and let yourself be more fantastical in how you're thinking about stories. You've probably told this story before, but the first book that you published is sort of a modern fairy tale, right? We see that as sort of, did you know that while you were writing it? Were you self-consciously mimicking kind of the form of a fairy tale?
I think it was so ingrained in me that I wasn't really thinking about it. But of course, it has all those elements. I think I became a little more conscious of doing that later. I have The Rose and the Beast as fairy tales retold literally. But I think the language of fairy tales, the world of fairy tales was just part of who I was. So it came out kind of naturally in the first book.
What are your favorite fairy tales to go to when you're refilling or revisiting?
Well, you're going to like this one because I know it's yours too. I a lot of times Bluebeard, which is why I love you, So
it's basically like all of the patriarchy in one fairy tale, right?
Exactly. It's amazing. That one and The Three Heads in the Well, which is talk about dark. It's insane.
You wrote a story about that. I think
Yes, in that anthology we're in with Susie Wright's anthology. So
it's so fucking creepy.
It's so creepy. I mean, talk about like ultimate horror stories. But of course, I find stuff in the most traditional ones of Sleeping Beauty and Snow White. The sleeping princess to me is really the sleeping goddess, the feminine energy that is trying to be reawakened. And these stories are a way to kind of smuggle that material into the popular consciousness and culture, I think.
I remember when you let me read the short story with the 3 disembodied heads in it, there's a dream logic to that kind of storytelling. There's something that's such a relief to me about that kind of magic realist storytelling where you don't have to explain why something is, it just is. You don't have to explain why they're just heads. First the heroine is making a sandwich, then she puts on her shoes, and then she finds 3 disembodied heads because that's the world.
And you just said it exactly. It's like Murakami stories, like, because she's making a sandwich, or in his books that he's making pasta, right? Like, because of that, we're so grounded in the real world for just a moment in the beginning that then, and that voice has so much authority that then when there's 3 heads in the well, we believe it because we're so grounded in the reality, right? Of the sandwich, which I find so interesting. It's like the magic makes the real more real and the real makes the magic more magic.
You know what? Like, I have more questions for you, but I just want to pay you a compliment. And this will be a little inside baseball for people who watch The Magicians. I told the whole writer's room, to read in one of your books, there's a girl who lost her parents. It's a retelling of the Orpheus myth. And Orpheus is a drug in that story. Correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but the simple way of explaining it is that she uses the drug to be with her parents again for just a couple of hours at a time. She's a junkie, essentially. Her whole life revolves around getting the drug so she can be with her parents for just a little while. And then the whole time she's there, she's just ashamed that she's on this drug and doesn't want to tell her parents. The last season of The Magicians is largely about the death of one of the main characters and everyone's grieving process, but all through the lens of all of the archetypal stuff that happens when you grieve. There's something so painful and essentially unresolved about it that we were just looking for examples of stories that existed in that painful ambiguity. So thank you for that story.
Thank you so much. I'm honored that you recommended it. That's awesome.
The job is not to resolve the paradoxes. The job is to like illuminate them and tell a good story inside them. But it's not like I walked away from that book understanding death, so it's not going to upset me. Like that book was just sort of like a pat on the shoulder. Like, yeah, it's really hard. I don't know either. This is a story about how none of us know.
And isn't that the key of like writing, where you don't start with some moralistic idea or something you want to like make somebody believe? It's just naturally you're exploring what you believe, and then hopefully it's something that resonates for them, and you learn more about it as you write, and others maybe learn more about it in themselves. Although it's going to be moral in that we're telling it through our lens of how we perceive the world.
But you're right, there shouldn't be any added pressure to have it all figured out. You know, like, well, we're masters of this, so now we're going to write about it and teach you, versus, I don't know, everyone's drowning, we're just writing about it.
Exactly, yeah.
What do you find yourself attracted to writing about right now?
I'm not quite sure. I just really have to see what happens with this book. I also have to keep exploring and writing, even though I really just care about what's happening with this book. So, which is something I tell other people. It's really easy to tell other people, oh, when you send your book out to agents or publishers, just don't think about it and start something new, right? That's great advice. But to actually do it when you've just poured years of your life, you know, I just did an MFA program. I spent 4 years on this book, right? I've revised it numerous times. I care about it as much as anything I've ever written. So like, how do I just go, oh, that's fine. It can go out there and go off to college or whatever. And now what? I'm going to like have another baby, you know, right now. I know, you know, I'm just exhausted. So
do you give yourself a time limit for that, or are you just going to see how it goes?
I don't have a specific time limit. Like Isabel Andy writes a new book every year on the same day, starts a new book. Amazing. But she's a goddess. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
You know, I know that once I get into something new and it takes on a life of its own, I'll feel much better and happy. But until I get there, I'll probably have to push a little bit, but maybe not too hard right away. Like give myself a little time of filling up again.
Key in what you just said is that you're pushing yourself to do it a little bit, that you don't expect full productivity, but you also don't just stop writing. Yeah.
I mean,
or reading, filling up.
Exactly. Because reading can be the essential key there, because you might not be able to write a whole new book right away, but you can start getting ideas, getting inspired from just reading alone, you know, and teaching. You know, I'm teaching so much that's a big part of it too. Like I'm engaged with words and language and story every day.
Is it too soon to ask you like the name of your book and stuff? It's too soon for you to talk about it?
I can say the name. The name is House of Hearts, and it's set in the Salton Sea, and it's about a young woman who's searching for her boyfriend who's gone missing in the area of the Salton Sea, and gets involved with this sort of self-help cult that's called House of Hearts. There is some mythic material woven into it as well. That's all. But hopefully we'll know.
That was
more
enticing.
Soon. Thank you.
I have a couple just practical life questions, because I think part of the barrier to entry psychologically about writing is just most of us are not privileged to have lives that make it easy to just write for long and uninterrupted stretches. Yeah. And when I met you, you were the single mother of 2 young children and writing books all the time and teaching and doing all of this other stuff. You didn't seem like you had a lot of uninterrupted long stretches to me.
I think it is about just writing when you have any opportunity to write. So even if I can't sit down for this many hours at the same time every day, it's on my mind. And then when I have that free time, I'm hopefully downloading whatever I can come up with. It's just the luxury that most people don't have anymore, to be able to sit for long hours and dream and write and read, you know, right? We're working. So you have to fit it in as you can.
I find great comfort in that, because it's like, it isn't as though you had it easy. You just found little pockets.
Yeah, pockets, yeah.
As your children were growing up, do you feel like they had a pretty good understanding of what you do for a living and to give you space and all of that? Or was it just like, I don't know, sometimes she's typing, I need shit?
So this is my office. This is also, as you can see, there's the kitchen behind me. The living room is here. There's no doors. So I basically had kids running back and forth and in and out, and dogs and etc. It's not ideal, but in another way, I am grateful. So I'm able to kind of tune into that world of my story once it's taking off. And hopefully I'm as able to tune into my kids when they need me. But it's multitasking, it's fitting it in when you can. Sometimes I have a friend who gets up at 4:30 in the morning. She has 3 kids. There's people that write late at night. There's ways to sort of fit it in as best you can and know that it's going to be imperfect and the work might be imperfect and you can revisit it and edit it later, maybe when you do have more unbroken time, and use this time to just pour out whatever comes out.
As you're saying that, it makes me think about this other thing that you and I talk about sometimes, which is how different things are for women. This is a blanket statement. Obviously, this isn't true 100% of the time, but that kind of busy, imperfect life where you're carrying a lot of loads for a lot of different people is what probably most women's lives look like in our culture. This is why it's exciting to me to think of, more young women, single moms, single dads, like just people who are carrying a lot of different kinds of loads and going, I don't know, but I'm never going to be able to do that thing. Like, read articles about writers who's like, my wife takes care of everything. And for a month, I just walk around in a daze and then I write my novel and occasionally I jog. And most of us will never have that perfection because our culture is not set up to make room for like female genius, to be frank. But to me, the cost is too high to not have these voices, to not have your voice, to not have the voices of women whose lives look like yours, but 10 times harder.
But I do think I did produce a lot of books, and some of them I would probably say, I could have taken that back, could have revised that, Maybe that's why I'm a little slower now, because I'm being a little more meticulous. But I do think that impulse, as we started by saying, to just express yourself in whatever form as best you can and when you can. I love what you said about just encouraging all those people out there that have beautiful stories to tell to just tell them.
So the publishing side, it's contracted in the last few years, right? It's smaller, harder to get books published.
Yes. Even getting an agent is a lot harder. I mean, a lot harder than when I started, but that was really long ago, So an exciting thing is that self-publishing exists, and there are a lot of small presses that are important, and hopefully we can support, especially right now. But I think the most important thing is to not think about it too much when you are writing, because that can be very inhibiting. If you can just write as if it's not an issue, and then you find the people that you trust who can help you look for different paths and alternative paths. And I think that there will be more and more alternative paths, and people need stories. We can't live without stories. So there will still be stories. There will still be ways to get those stories into other people's hands. It's just a matter of how that changes over time and sort of innovative ideas about how to do that.
Yeah. Under ordinary circumstances, I'm happy to talk to people about finding an agent, breaking on into the TV side of things. I would have many more questions for you, but I feel like we're in this moment of reckoning where we don't exactly know what the economy or the world is going to look like on the B side. Now, I'm much more of a tourist into the world of books, but I've noticed many legitimate success stories of people who weren't able to be published in the conventional way, self-published, and then their books were picked up later because they did a lot of other hustling.
You do have to do a lot of hustling, as you say, a lot of work, but you have to do that in traditional publishing too. It's almost a full-time job, even if you have a big publisher who gives you a lot of money up front. You got to be out there promoting your book, talking about your book, connecting to people. Expect a lot of work, but expect a lot of work really with anything, with writing. I want to see what happens after this because, as I say, we need stories so much. We need different stories.
It's a way of taking power back when someone says no to you, saying, well, then I'll just put it out there and I'll put myself out there.
I talked to a big publicity guru once and asked her sort of her secret, and she said connecting to one person at a time in a real, genuine, organic way. It's not like trying to get this big message out to all these people. It's personally finding a connection between you and somebody else and listening. So I think that is a big part of that self-promotion that you have to do, whether you're working with a traditional publisher or doing it on your own. It's a genuine connection rather than a forced sales tactic. I think it changed it for me when she said that, how I looked at what that means.
As somebody who was sort of young and trying to break into Hollywood, I experienced this so much where people would give me lots of advice. And frequently it was about networking.
Yeah.
they would say you're talented, but you need to network. And I'm like, what does that look like? Like, go to parties? I'm not really a go to parties girl. I don't know how to do that. I don't know. When I'm there, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to deliver what people expect in a conversation. I'm to sell myself that way. For me, I was like, I'll just go on reality TV instead. That'll be easier. But what you're describing is, seeking to have conversation with people who really are like-minded and interested in what you have to say and burning to explore similar things. Then there's no gap in authenticity. And if your audience grows, that's great, because it's more people who want to talk about the same shit you want to talk about.
Exactly. And I think we're similar in that we both love to work. I would rather be working than schmoozing, because I don't know how to schmooze either. But, but if you are connecting to people on that level of work, and I don't mean work in a sense of anything negative at all. I mean, just like telling the truth and doing the next step. And if you're connecting to people on that level, then it feels much more authentic too.
I'm going to let you go in a minute, but I just have never asked you about this. And I didn't know that you did an MFA until recently. So you're many years into a very shiny, prestigious career as a novelist. What was the catalyst to go back to school?
So at first it was very simple. I teach in an MFA program, and they were saying, we really need to get accredited, so everybody needs MFA. So I was doing it for that. And then what happened was I got to experience that feeling of being a beginning writer in a way again. It was really challenging. I was the oldest, or in the top, 1% of age in my program. But it was really inspiring. I learned a ton. I read a lot of classic books that I had loved that I hadn't read since I was in my 20s. I reread them and I wrote about them. So I learned a ton from that. I learned from my teachers. I learned from my fellow students. And maybe most importantly, as a teacher, I learned what it feels like to be on the other side of the critique. And it doesn't always feel good. But I think I have even more empathy for my students being on that other side because I was there. So I think all those things helped, and I wrote a book out of it that I probably would not have written. If you're not going to be teaching, there are alternatives to it. Either way, I think you can get a lot out of it if you're able to.
There's something interesting about the fact that we go to school when we're young and we're out of college by the time we're in our early 20s, even people who get graduate degrees. Theoretically, it's the pursuit of your 20s. We're so much better suited to really getting into it. And as you say, like really hearing critique, for example, like I took a lot of creative writing classes in college. I don't remember myself being great at taking notes back then. They hurt my feelings, everyone.
Yeah.
It's like going back and going to school later in your life, whatever that means, however it manifests. It's such an interesting, it's just a tantalizing idea. As you know, my husband did that a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Like when I heard him talking about the stuff that they were studying, I was like, I can't fucking imagine somebody 21 being able to understand this stuff about the human psyche. You should have to be in your 40s to go,
or older,
50s, 60s. I mean, I want to live a long time. So I find that inspiring. And I think it's funny that you're like, I don't know, I was older than some of the people in class. It's like the other people in class are like, fuck, Francesca Lia Block is in this class. What the fuck? Shit. It's like, it's fine. She wrote so many books, she's lost count. It's fine.
Aw. Well, I do think you can never stop learning, right? It keeps you, it can keep you young. I think that's a cliche, but it's kind of true. Hopefully.